Hello, darlings, and welcome back to Diva Deep Cuts. I am your host, Ben, and thank you for joining me as we journey through the best songs you've never heard by the great divas of today and yesterday. Thank you so much for listening here on Spotify or on YouTube, and I hope you enjoy this as much as I do. This week, we're taking a journey through legendary R&B singer Monica's catalog. So Monica has had hits on hits on hits, several multi-platinum albums, has won at least one Grammy, and is still making waves at radio today, which is truly a serve for someone who's been in the game as long as she has. And yet somehow she always seems to be underrated, and I'm really not sure why. I mean, she's done so much. She's made so much great music and carved such a lane for herself, but yet, I don't know. She doesn't always seem to get her flowers. So I disagree with that. And let's give her her flowers today by seeing what the best songs are besides the singles on all of her albums. So I discovered Monica around the turn of the millennium when people kept requesting her hit Angel of Mine as like the write-in play a song for someone special on Casey Kasem's American Top 40, which all of that is dating myself. I know. But that was my first exposure to her voice. And then when I first got into popular music, she was taking a break because of some traumatic things that had happened in her personal life. So she wasn't really actively releasing or promoting any music, but her videos kept being used all over in clips on different programs on TV. So I was aware of her. When she did reach the point where she was ready to come back, I was excited when she released music, even though her first attempt with the All Eyes on Me project didn't go as planned between leaks and the underperformance of the lead single. She showed that she still had it when After the Storm came out and hit number one, had multiple hits, including So Gone and You Should Have Known Better. And then she still continued on from there, making hits throughout the 2000s and the 2010s. And so today we're still waiting. Monica has been releasing one off singles and teasing her next album for like 8 years at this point, if I have the release date of Code Red correct in my brain. So yeah, so that's where Monica is at this time. Um, so let's get started with a song from her debut album, Miss Thang, which was released in 1995. This song is called Get Down. What I love about Get Down is the production in the background. Like Monica's vocal performance is great. Like she was only 14 or 15 when she made this record, and her voice sounded mature beyond her years, as well as her emotional delivery. I honestly don't know what her life was like before fame and her origins, but she just sang with such a conviction of a grown person when she was only a teenager. And so that gives this song a lot of weight because subject material wise, like this is a pretty standard 90s R&B topic of just like one person telling the other person like they've got to get down with them if they want to have a relationship. But Monica has this smooth, confident delivery. Like she can belt with the best of them, and we'll get to that on later songs. But this one is shows her ability to show restraint and some versatility in performance style that she doesn't necessarily need to belt at the top of her range to show off. But production wise, I am always a sucker for like a 90s jazzy minor key chord progression. And that's, there's only, I think, two chords on the piano that repeat throughout, but it just creates that like rainy late night 90s jazzy R&B atmosphere that I am such a fan of. So that was what really drew me to this track. um, it stuck out a lot. This one is also not produced by Dallas Austin, who was the executive producer and main creative force behind Monica's debut album. Um, this was produced by Tim and Bob, who produced many hits for artists throughout the 90s and early 2000s. Um, and so I really just like what they did here with the like muted horn effect that repeats, the gentle percussion that keeps it holds the song but still drives it forward, and just the jazzy feel that they came up with. So that is why this is my favorite deep cut from Miss Thang. So on to her next album, 1998's The Boy Is Mine. My favorite deep cut from this record is Cross the Room, which is also the B side to second single, The First Night. So let's give it a listen. Yeah. Cross the Room, again, doesn't have the most unique of stories, but I like how it's delivered. And I like the fact that it does paint a picture. Like, instead of just being a generic song about love or infatuation, it paints the picture that Monica comes to a party with her boyfriend, or supposed boyfriend, at least a date, maybe. We'll call him a date. And then he basically abandons her, and she sees another guy across the room who looks interested. It's basically like, yes, if you're interested, let's dance and see where this goes. Like, clearly, I'm not wanted by my date, so I can just have fun at this party. So, yeah. So I like the sort of mixed emotion that it's still kind of like a fun, bouncy vibe, but there's that sort of like undercurrent of like, well, fine. If you're not going to pay attention to me, I will make my own fun. But that like seed of like disappointment and frustration. Production wise, it's very energetic. It has this sort of sparkling percussion line that keeps things bright. Some synth keyboards that just keep the energy going the whole time. And but they never, I don't feel like they overpower Monica. Like, Monica owns the song, and her vocals are at the forefront, and she is the one in command of this story and of the situation and song. Um, like I don't I we're showcasing music that I like here, but for those of you who listened when I did album reviews, I do sometimes did on those mention when I was disappointed that the vocals were buried in the production. I'm like, what's the point of having a vocalist if you can't hear what they're singing? So this is not the case here, and Cross the Room is a nice balance between a really full, energetic production and Monica's voice being front and center and her owning the delivery. So next up, we have a song that's actually from a soundtrack and not one of Monica's albums. She was in a made-for-TV movie produced by MTV called Love Song in 2000 and recorded a dramatic Diane Warren written ballad called What My Heart Says, which is one of my favorite Monica songs of all time. So, well, I'm going to say, well, I couldn't say give it a listen because unfortunately, What My Heart Says is not available on Spotify in the United States. Maybe it is in some international territories if you're listening from elsewhere in the world, but I do not have the ability to put it into the episode because of its unavailability in my country. But feel free to look it up on YouTube or other sources. It is this big, sweeping, piano driven ballad where Monica's voice just sounds very open and warm despite the dramatic subject material. Um, Monica has been one who can, like, has feet in both worlds. She can jump on a track like Every Time the Beat Drops with Dem Franchise Boys and sound like she's, well, not only does she not sound out of place, but like she is the one in charge and Dem Franchise Boys are her feature. But she can also record these more poppy AC Diane Warren songs and also make them her own and have it not sound out of place either. Like she also recorded Inside with Diane Warren on the Boy Is Mine album, which is a standout single from that record. And I think they've worked together a couple times besides these two songs. But the the sustained belts, just the drama as the song builds, and it feels like it keeps going higher and higher, and the tension builds, and then it releases when Monica belts the final notes at the end. It's just such a beautiful ballad that I wish got more spotlight or had been promoted as a single, but and I think it would have done well. Those Diane Warren ballads were still able to make waves at radio at the time Monica recorded What My Heart Says. And yeah, I love it. Um, and I hope you will too if you will go and check it out on your own. So, one way that's kind of cheating, but some of the All Eyes on Me tracks were used on After the Storm and are on streaming. So, the next track is Breaks My Heart from 2002's All Eyes on Me, and we'll talk about it more after you get to listen to the song. That's another one that sounds like it goes around in a circle. It also almost feels like a wedding song to me, especially when we get to the key change when Monica has her big belt at the climax of the song. But I think it's also the sentiment, which I love, that, you know, it's kind of like a coming of age record where it's like, Monica was young, she thought she could do better, not realizing how good she had it with the subject in question, and then coming to realize, no, I do actually care for this person and I want to be with them, and coming back and saying, oh, thank goodness you waited for me, because it breaks my heart how I treated you. And there's the undertone of like, my heart would be broken even worse if you hadn't been here. And I can't believe that you still are. So it's, self-aware accountability, which we like on this show, as a really sweet and gentle production that kind of like straddles a bunch of genres. And Monica shows her versatility again. Like she can do that very clear tone on songs like What My Heart Says, but then here have more vibrato and do more runs up and down, but still have the belting and give a very emotive performance. So, yeah, this is one of my favorites from All Eyes on Me and After the Storm, which I said I'd explain for those who are not aware. I mentioned this, I think, at the beginning, but Monica's third album was supposed to be a record called All Eyes on Me with this title track as the first single, but the song All Eyes on Me underperformed. Radio wasn't really biting, and there wasn't really any other form of measuring music consumption at that time except radio. Sales were dead, and digital sales and streaming didn't really exist yet. And so even though it had a fun video and a Michael Jackson sample and all this stuff, like it just wasn't received well. It didn't perform well. And then the whole album leaked online a month or more before release. So they did try a second single called To Hood, but that did even worse. And then with that coupled with the leak, they just decided to scrap the album and go back to the studio and cook up something else. However, All Eyes on Me did get an official release in Japan. I spent a pretty penny like a decade ago to buy a CD import of All Eyes on Me from Japan so that I could hear the whole record. But 6 of the songs also made it to the next album, After the Storm, which Breaks My Heart was one of those. And After the Storm ended up coming out in July of 2003 instead of fall of 2002, which was the original All Eyes on Me release date, with brand new lead single So Gone that was produced by Missy Elliott, massive hit, top 10 on the Hot 100, multi-week number 1 on the R&B charts. Set the album up really well. The album sold over 500,000 copies, debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200, so it worked out in the end. But The five songs that did not get a release, which is really three, when because Two Hood and All Eyes on Me are out there. I'm grateful to be able to hear them. My favorite is the uh, Biggie hypnotized sampling "I'm Back" intro. But anyway, I'm getting off course, and this segment is getting long. But go look up "All Eyes on Me." I'm sure there's bootleg YouTube videos to listen to the couple of tracks that are harder to find. So, taking another step forward, now we are looking at I was going to say "All Eyes on Me" again. Monica's third released, fourth produced album after the storm, with the Dark Child number "Ain't Gonna Cry No More." So I got my wires crossed, and "Ain't Gonna Cry No More" was also on both "All Eyes on Me" and "After the Storm." But I'm keeping it because I'm number one, I'm the boss. And number two, I am a sucker for Dark Child productions from this time. Like, this sounds like something from Brandy's Full Moon crossed with 3LW's I Do Want to Get Down. Um, I don't know. It just has that like crackling energy, that the angry sentiment similar to Brandy's What About Us, but although Monica's delivery and the production is a little bit less aggressive than that record. But yeah, I love the story because on first glance, it sounds like it's just a breakup record. But then as you keep listening, you realize, oh, this is a record of Monica realizing that she was the other woman, and that this man had a wife and kids that he lied about and pretended didn't exist. And, her just being like, no, we already had problems and things were going sideways, and you lied to me about your life? Like, wow. So, yeah, an anthem to be like, don't shed tears over terrible people who aren't worth it. Over a brisk, catchy, staccato Dark Child early 2000s production. Like, mwah, chef's kiss. Excellent. Wonderful song. Sentiment is horrible. I hope no one actually experiences that, what the speaker in the song experienced, but the song itself, very well produced, excellent early 2000s R&B, in my opinion. All right. So next up is Monica's 2005. Is it 5 or 6? I don't want to get it wrong. 2006 album, The Makings of Me. And the deep cut we are going to spotlight from this record is the closing track called Getaway. This is a very candid and vulnerable piano driven ballad. It's actually written by PJ Morton, which I did not know before recording and prepping for this episode. Um, Frankly, I didn't realize he was involved in the music industry that long. I thought he was a relatively new artist, but maybe in terms of being a recording artist of his own merits, is a newer thing, and he was working as a songwriter and producer before that. I'm not sure. I'm not super familiar with his career trajectory, just of his collaborations with JoJo and some other artists. So nice to see him here. Jermaine Dupri handled production on this one, and he's bringing in the skills that he assembled and sound he perfected on the Emancipation of Mimi with Mariah Carey of the Ballad with the Beat. But I like that the beat is not too strong until the second half of the song, and it sounds more like, maybe it is, an actual snare drum rather than program drums. But yeah, I've always liked this one. Even though Monica is not a co-writer, I imagine she and PJ Morton sat down together and talked about her life and her experiences after getting famous. And it's like, okay, you work hard to achieve your dream, but what comes after to keep taking care of yourself once you've made it in the music industry? So it's just, melancholy. It's very sweet. I love when the orchestra and the snare drum kick in. It just adds a nice element so that it's not just solely piano and vocal. Um, and I don't know. I just remember getting this CD from the library, listening through it, and just being really enchanted with Getaway and how real it is, Even though, yes, you can, on a cursory listen, you can be like, oh, whatever. It's just like a sappy ballad to close the album. But I always just really loved it. I thought it was really succinct, sweet, and very real about, like, you're still a person with who has to take care of yourself and your life. Just because you're in the public eye doesn't mean you have no problems and no struggles. So, yeah. All right. Next, we are going to Monica's 2010 album, Still Standing. We're going to be doing two from this record because Monica only has 8 studio albums. So, this is the one where I loved enough songs to give it an extra one to flesh out the top 10 Monica deep cuts. So, first up is One in a Lifetime. This one I love because of Monica's earnest vocal performance. She just shines right through. There's a sort of yearning in her vocal performance, and it just really sells the song for me. Because on the surface, it sounds fairly typical of like 2009, 2010 piano driven production, where Stargate and others were just kind of doing like it's piano driven, but it has synthesizers. It's like a mid tempo ballad with a beat, kind of aping Mariah and JD. But this one I like because also it's more piano driven, and the background vocal layering is just stunning. I think Monica does it all herself, but I'm not 100% sure. But it doesn't matter because it's just beautiful. And I wondered if this was a Stargate production when I listened to it, but it's actually not. It's by Los de Maestro, who has produced for many R&B and hip hop artists over the past several years. But I don't know that he's ever gotten his due the same way as somebody like Jermaine Dupri, Stargate, Brian Michael Cox, etc. Um, but I just really like this one. It's just very like straightforward and earnest without being corny or overdone. It always stuck out to me ever since I had the CD version of this album back when it came out in 2010, and I knew I was going to feature it here, which is part of why I decided to do more than one song from Still Standing, because not only is it one of the few Monica albums I owned, I think I owned 3. I had no 4. I had this one, All Eyes on Me, because I bought the Japanese import, After the Storm, and The Boy Is Mine. But yeah, this one was always a gem to me. It just kind of like tugs at my emotions enough to make me invested in the song. Um, so yeah, so sticking with this record, we are going for one of the up-tempo songs next with the Missy Elliott produced If You Were My Man. Oh, that one's so much fun. You all know I'm a sucker for 80s throwback production. And I swear, Monica can sing anything. Like, her voice just fits into any genre and she does it well, which is not an easy feat. I think a lot of people pigeonhole her into R&B because of the tone of her voice, but like she has shown over and over again that she can pretty much do any genre. So I could just picture this, and Monica being like big back in the mid 80s with the big hair and the colorful soundstage music video and everything. Um, and yeah, this song is just expertly produced. Like at the beginning, it sounds kind of sparse. And you're like, okay, what's going on here? And then Monica's vocals kick in and give it some dimension. And then all of a sudden, it blossoms when it hits the pre chorus with layered background harmonies, synthesizers creating this very lush, bright, colorful production. And then when we circle back around for the second verse, there's more elements in the production, even though it scales back to something a bit more sparse to let the vocals take center stage. So yeah, it's just catchy, fun, and I enjoy it so, so much. It's one of my favorites on this record, and that's why I wanted to spotlight it here. So we are taking another step forward to Monica's 2012 album New Life with the song Daddy's Good Girl. So New Life is probably my least favorite Monica album. I find it mostly full of filler. Like just because R&B was not at all what was popular in the mainstream in 2012 does not mean that that's a reason to deliver an album full of filler. So I had to take my time with this album to find something that jumped out at me enough to feature on this episode, but I didn't want to skip it entirely. So after a couple listens through, Daddy's Good Girl was the one that jumped out to me the most. It has this big, open, dynamic, windy production that kind of I don't know, it's like rainy and shimmery and windy. It feels like weather. And Monica does a good job of telling and selling the story of stating her needs and what she needs to feel secure in her relationship, which is a sentiment that I like. So, yeah, this one definitely grabbed me the most. Um, it's not the strongest hook in the world, but it is solid. And on an album full of snooze fest songs, this one definitely stands out because there's some drama, there's some tension, there's some emotion in the atmosphere. So, yeah. So, that was my little dalliance through this otherwise boring album. I'm sorry, Monica, if you ever listen to this. It's just not my favorite. However, for the final song featured on today's episode, we turn to the exquisite, most recent studio album, Code Red. And of the many, many choices I had, because I loved a lot of songs on this record, I went with the track Sugar. I just said it before and I'll say it again. I am such a sucker for the 80s throwback production. And that's why I picked Sugar from this album to represent in this episode. And it's just so much fun. It was produced by Polo de Don and it's so energetic. Um, and I really love how on the chorus there's a production switch and it suddenly sounds like contemporary hip hop production after sounding straight up 80s on the verses and pre chorus and bridge. Um, Monica sounds fantastic and energetic as ever. The background vocals are layered, but they're buried far enough in the production that they're just like little supports for the lead, which I like. It's again very 80s, where the background vocals are just like accents rather than sort of a wall of sound of harmonies. So, yeah, this one is just really fun. It comes about 2/3 of the way through the album, and it kind of picks up the energy after some ballads, and it's just like such a treat in my opinion. Like I would not mind if Monica continued exploring these sounds as she preps her next album or albums. She said that there's both an R&B and a country album in the works for a couple of years now. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, that was Sugar and that's um one of many gems on Code Red, which did not perform well. So if you've never checked out that album from Monica, I recommend it. There's a lot of great gems to find. There was only one single, so pretty much everything's a deep cut. And with that, we have arrived at the end of our journey through Monica's catalog. I hope that you enjoyed this week's trip with me and you found some songs to love or got excited that some deep cuts that are close to your heart were featured today. Please let me know on Spotify, in the YouTube comments, on social media, or on my website. And with that said, remember, you can go to divadeepcuts.com to sign up for the email list to get exclusive bonus content of the forgotten single clips, as well as to stay up to date on all things Diva Deep Cuts. I also have a blog there with honorable mentions and longer stories about my relationships with each of these artists' catalogs. And there are links to my social media accounts where you can follow me for the deep cut of the day, which is just a fun little thing I started doing to spotlight even more songs that just pop into my head but may not be the biggest hits that everyone's familiar with. So thank you so much for listening and supporting here on Spotify or YouTube. And I look forward to journeying through another artist's catalogs with you next week. Until then, I am Ben, and this is Diva Deep Cuts.